The predator refused to let the human go. Hyun-woo stared at the twisted metal that used to be his navigation console. Sparks flew from broken wires as smoke filled the small maintenance shuttle. The emergency lights flashed red across his face while warning alarms screamed in the cramped cockpit. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, hitting the communications panel with his palm. Nothing but static answered him back. The shuttle shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of the unknown planet below. Hyun-woo had been doing routine maintenance on the cargo ship's outer hull when a solar storm hit. The electromagnetic pulse fried most of his shuttle's systems and knocked him off course. Now he was falling toward a green and blue world that wasn't on any of his star charts. He gripped the manual controls as the shuttle spun through thick clouds. The automated landing system was dead, which meant he had to bring this bucket of bolts down using only his eyes and hands. Hyun-woo had done emergency landings before, but never on a completely unknown planet. The clouds cleared, and he saw dense jungle stretching in every direction. Massive trees with purple leaves reached up like fingers, trying to grab his falling shuttle. He pulled hard on the controls, trying to find a clearing big enough to land in. There, a small open space near a river. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The shuttle hit the ground hard, bouncing twice before sliding through mud and coming to rest against a fallen tree trunk. Hyun-woo's safety harness cut into his chest as he was thrown forward. His head hit the console and stars exploded behind his eyes. When the world stopped spinning, he checked himself for injuries. A cut on his forehead was bleeding, and his left shoulder ached, but nothing felt broken. The shuttle's hull had held together, which was more than he had hoped for. Hyun-woo activated the emergency protocols. The air outside tested safe for humans, though it smelled strange through the filtered samples. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, but manageable. Most importantly, there were no immediate signs of intelligent life. He gathered his emergency supplies: a medical kit, water purification tablets, emergency food rations, a basic tool kit, and a small plasma cutter for cutting through metal or wood. His personal communicator was dead, just like everything else electronic on the shuttle. The first day passed quietly. Hyun-woo set up a simple shelter using pieces from his damaged shuttle and some large leaves from nearby plants. He found the river and tested the water. After purification, it tasted clean and fresh. Some of the local fruits scanned as edible, though they had an odd sweet and sour flavor. As night fell, strange sounds echoed through the jungle, howls and roars from creatures he couldn't see. Something large crashed through the underbrush not far from his camp. Hyun-woo checked his plasma cutter and made sure it was fully charged. He wasn't much of a fighter, but the tool could cut through most materials if he needed to defend himself. He tried to sleep in his makeshift shelter, but every sound made him jump. This planet was clearly full of predators, and he was just a small human mechanic with basic survival skills. On the second day, Hyun-woo explored the area around his crash site. He found more edible plants and discovered a small cave that might make a better shelter than his metal and leaf construction. The cave was dry and had only one entrance, which would be easier to defend. That's when he found the footprints. They were huge, bigger than his entire torso. 3 massive clawed toes had dug deep gouges in the soft earth near the river. Whatever made these tracks was heavy and powerful. The claw marks suggested a predator designed for tearing through flesh and bone. Hyun-woo followed the tracks for a short distance, more out of curiosity than wisdom. They led deeper into the jungle, toward areas where the trees grew so thick that very little sunlight reached the ground. He decided not to follow them any further. That night, something watched him from the darkness. Hyun-woo felt eyes on him as he sat by his small fire, eating processed rations and trying to repair his communicator. He couldn't see anything in the shadows beyond his camp, but the feeling of being observed was so strong he could barely concentrate on his work. Every few minutes, he would look up and scan the tree line. Nothing moved, but the normal jungle sounds had gone quiet. Even the insects had stopped their constant chirping. That usually meant a large predator was nearby. He kept his plasma cutter close and tried to look relaxed while every muscle in his body stayed ready to run or fight. Hours passed like this, with Hyun-woo pretending to work on his equipment while actually watching for movement in the darkness. Then he saw them, two glowing amber eyes, reflecting his firelight from about 30 meters away. They were positioned high off the ground, suggesting something much taller than a human. The eyes didn't blink or move. They just watched. Okay, Hyun-woo said quietly to himself. That's not terrifying at all. He slowly reached for his plasma cutter, trying not to make any sudden movements. The eyes followed his motion but didn't come any closer. Whatever was out there seemed content to observe for now. Hyun-woo spent the longest night of his life sitting by his dying fire, staring back at those amber eyes. Sometimes they would disappear for a few minutes, only to reappear in a slightly different location. The creature was moving around his camp, studying him from different angles. As dawn approached, the eyes finally vanished. Hyun-woo waited until full daylight before moving from his position. His back ached from sitting in the same spot all night, and his hands were cramped from gripping the plasma cutter. In the morning light, he found more footprints. They formed a complete circle around his camp, confirming that something large had been walking around his shelter all night. The creature had come within 10 meters of where he slept, close enough to kill him easily if it had wanted to. But it hadn't attacked. It had just watched. Hyun-woo studied the tracks more carefully in daylight. Along with the massive clawed feet, he found handprints. These showed 4 fingers with opposable thumbs pressed into the mud near the river. Tool using. Hands meant intelligence. This wasn't just some big animal hunting for food. This was something smart, something that had been deliberately studying him. The realization made his blood run cold. He wasn't just stranded on an alien planet with dangerous wildlife. He was being stalked by something that might be as intelligent as he was, but much more dangerous. That night, the creature came closer. The predator refused to let the human go. On the 3rd night, the creature finally showed itself. Hyun-woo was moving his supplies to the cave he had found earlier. The small shelter offered better protection than his damaged shuttle, and the single entrance meant nothing could sneak up behind him. He had just finished arranging his emergency rations when massive claws tore through the leafy covering he had built over the cave mouth. The creature that pushed through was unlike anything in human records. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light. Powerful muscles moved under its armored skin as amber eyes fixed on Hyun-woo with laser focus. Its arms ended in hands that could easily crush a human skull, each finger tipped with claws as long as kitchen knives. Hyun-woo's first instinct was to run. His second was to reach for his plasma cutter. Instead, he did something that surprised even himself. He sat down. "Well, hello there, big guy," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You've been watching me for a while now, haven't you?" The creature froze. In all of Vorthak's long life as an apex predator, prey had never responded this way. They ran. They fought. They begged. They did not sit down and start talking as if meeting a neighbor over morning coffee. Vorthak tilted his massive head, studying this strange, small creature. The human showed no signs of the fear scent that usually filled the air when he appeared. Instead, the little being seemed almost relieved to finally see him clearly. "I figured you'd show up eventually," Hyun-woo continued, slowly moving his hands to show he wasn't reaching for weapons. "You've been circling my camp for days. Must be curious about what I am, right?" Vorthak understood none of the words, but the tone was unlike anything he had encountered. Where was the terror? The desperate attempt to escape? This human was speaking to him the way pack members spoke to each other during calm moments. The great predator took a step forward, and Hyun-woo fought every instinct telling him to scramble backward. Instead, he held his ground and kept talking. No. Back home, I worked with a lot of different animals. Farm animals mostly, but some wild ones too. My sister Yoonji always said I had a way with scared creatures. He managed a small smile. Though I have to admit, you're a bit bigger than anything I've dealt with before. Vorthak's amber eyes narrowed. The human's body language was all wrong for prey. No defensive posturing, no preparation to flee or attack. If anything, the small creature seemed to be trying to communicate. In Kethmori society, such behavior could only mean two things. Either this creature was so supremely confident in its abilities that it felt no threat, or it was displaying complete submission. Given the human's obvious physical limitations, submission seemed more likely. But submission usually came with cowering and obvious displays of surrender. This human sat upright, made direct eye contact, and continued making those strange vocal sounds in a calm, steady rhythm. Hyun-woo noticed the creature's posture change slightly. The aggressive forward lean had shifted to something more curious. "That's it," he said softly. "Just taking a look, aren't you? I bet you've never seen anything like me before." He slowly reached into his medical kit, moving deliberately so the creature could see everything he was doing. "You know what, friend? You look like you've had a rough time of it." In the better light of his cave, Hyun-woo could see old scars across the creature's hide. More importantly, he noticed what looked like an infected wound on its left forearm. The area around the injury was slightly swollen, and there was a discharge that didn't look healthy. "Oh, that doesn't look good at all," Hyun-woo said, pointing at the wound. "How long have you been carrying that around?" Vorthak followed the human's gesture to his own injured arm. The wound had been bothering him for weeks, a souvenir from a territorial dispute with another predator. In Kethmori culture, showing weakness was death, so he had simply endured the pain and infection rather than seek help. But this small creature was pointing at his injury with what appeared to be concern rather than recognition of vulnerability to exploit. Hyun-woo reached into his medical supplies and pulled out an antiseptic spray and some basic bandaging material. "I know this might sound crazy, but would you let me take a look at that? I'm pretty good with basic medical stuff." The predator's eyes followed every movement as Hyun-woo held up the medical supplies. The human's intentions were clear, even without shared language. This impossible little creature wanted to provide medical aid. Vorthak had lived for 43 cycles and had never encountered anything like this situation. Prey did not offer to heal predators. Pack members might share medical knowledge, but only between equals. What was this human? After several long minutes of mutual staring, Vorthak made a decision that would have seemed impossible to any other member of his species. He slowly extended his injured arm toward the human. Hyun-woo's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his movements slow and gentle. "Okay, that's a good boy. Let's see what we're dealing with here." The wound was indeed infected, but not severely. The creature's natural healing abilities had prevented it from becoming life-threatening, but the infection was clearly causing discomfort. Hyun-woo cleaned the area with antiseptic, noting how the massive predator held perfectly still during the process. "This might sting a bit," he warned, though he knew the creature couldn't understand his words. The tone seemed to help, though. Those amber eyes watched his face rather than his hands as he worked. Vorthak had expected pain when the human applied the strange-smelling liquid to his wound. What he hadn't expected was the immediate cooling relief that followed. Whatever this substance was, it was already reducing the constant ache he had been carrying. After cleaning and bandaging the wound, Hyun-woo sat back and admired his work. "There we go. That should help quite a bit, though you'll need to keep it clean and dry for a few days." He reached into his emergency rations and pulled out a nutrient bar, offering it to the creature. "I don't suppose you eat this kind of thing, but it's all I've got to share." Vorthak stared at the offered food. In his culture, sharing food was a sign of pack bonding, but only between established allies. This human was offering sustenance to a creature that could easily kill and eat it instead. The great predator accepted the small bar and tasted it cautiously. The flavor was strange, but not unpleasant. More importantly, the gesture itself meant something he couldn't quite understand. Over the following days, a routine developed. Hyun-woo would check on the creature's wound, cleaning and rebandaging it while talking constantly about everything and nothing. He spoke about his work as a mechanic, his family back home, his attempts to repair his communicator, and his observations about the local wildlife. Vorthak began to anticipate these visits. The human's presence had become oddly comforting, and the constant vocal sounds were strangely soothing. More puzzling still, his wound was healing faster than ever before, thanks to the regular medical attention. The predator found himself bringing gifts: fresh fruit from the jungle canopy, clean water from distant springs, and eventually small prey animals that he left near the human's cave. Each offering was accepted with the same calm gratitude, as if receiving gifts from a 3-meter killing machine was the most natural thing in the universe. Neither creature understood what was happening between them. Hyun-woo treated Vorthak like a large, intelligent animal that needed care and respect. Vorthak interpreted the human's behavior through the lens of pack dynamics, though no framework from his culture could adequately explain this relationship. What both of them began to recognize, without having words for it, was that neither wanted the other to leave. When Hyun-woo finally managed to get a weak signal on his emergency beacon 2 weeks later, he found himself strangely reluctant to activate it. The thought of rescue had sustained him through the crash and his first terrifying nights on this planet. Now it felt like abandonment, unexpected attachment. 3 weeks had passed since Hyun-woo first met Vorthak. The routine they had developed felt as natural as breathing. Every morning, the massive predator would appear at the cave entrance, waiting patiently while Hyun-woo checked his healing wound and shared breakfast. Hyun-woo had learned to read Vorthak's moods through subtle changes in posture and the positioning of his amber eyes. When the great creature was content, his shoulders would relax and his breathing would slow. When he was agitated, which happened whenever other predators came too close to the cave, his claws would extend slightly and a low rumble would vibrate through his chest. "You know what I think?" Hyun-woo said one morning while changing Vorthak's bandage. The wound had healed completely, but he continued the daily ritual because both of them seemed to find it comforting. "I think you're lonely. Big, tough predator. Like you, probably doesn't have many friends." Vorthak understood the tone, if not the words. The human always spoke in these gentle sounds during their morning meetings. Sometimes the vocal patterns seemed to be questions, sometimes statements, but they were always accompanied by careful touches and shared food. What Vorthak couldn't explain to himself was why he had begun to need these interactions. In Kethmori, culture adults were solitary except during mating season or territorial disputes. Yet he found himself growing restless when too many hours passed without seeing the small human. The afternoon brought proof of how much their relationship had changed. Hyun-woo was working on his small garden when he heard something crashing through the jungle toward his cave. The sounds were wrong for Vorthak, who moved with surprising stealth for such a large creature. This was something else. And it was moving fast. A pack of smaller predators burst into the clearing around his cave. They looked like oversized wolves with too many teeth and eyes that glowed yellow in the shadowed jungle light. 6 of them spread out in a hunting formation, clearly seeing Hyun-woo as easy prey. Hyun-woo backed toward his cave, reaching for his plasma cutter. He might be able to take 1 or 2 of them, but 6 was impossible. His heart hammered as the pack leader took a step forward, lips pulling back to show rows of sharp teeth. Then Vorthak appeared. The great predator moved like black lightning, dropping from the tree canopy directly into the middle of the pack. His roar shook leaves from nearby branches and sent smaller animals fleeing in all directions. The wolf-like creatures scattered immediately, recognizing an apex predator when they saw one. One pack member, braver or more desperate than the others, tried to circle around toward Hyunwoo. Vorthak's response was swift and final. A single swipe of his clawed hand sent the creature flying into a tree trunk with a sickening crack. The rest of the pack vanished into the jungle, leaving only the scent of fear and the sound of breaking branches as they fled. Vorthak stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning for any remaining threats. Only when he was satisfied that the danger had passed did he turn to look at Hyunwoo. "Well," Hyunwoo said, his voice shaky with leftover adrenaline. "That was impressive. Thank you." For the first time since they had met, Vorthak moved close enough to touch the human. One massive hand, surprisingly gentle, touched Hyunwoo's shoulder in what could only be described as a comforting gesture. That night, Vorthak didn't return to whatever lair he usually slept in. Instead, he curled up outside the cave entrance, positioning himself where he could see any approaching threats. His presence was both protective and possessive, like a guard dog who had claimed his territory. Hyunwoo found this both touching and slightly concerning. The creature was clearly intelligent, but his protective instincts were growing stronger every day. What would happen when rescue finally arrived? The answer came 2 days later. Hyunwoo was teaching Vorthak a simple game with stones when his emergency beacon finally connected to a passing ship. The device had been sending out weak signals for days, but something had finally heard it and responded. The moment the beacon activated with its loud confirmation tone, Vorthak's entire demeanor changed. The amber eyes that had grown warm and familiar suddenly turned cold and alert. The great predator rose to his full height and positioned himself between Hyunwoo and the beacon, clearly recognizing it as some kind of communication device. "It's okay," Hyunwoo said quickly, trying to calm his friend. "It's just calling for help. Other humans will come to take me home." But even as he said the words, Hyunwoo realized he wasn't sure he wanted to go home. Life on this planet had been dangerous and difficult, but it had also been simple in a way his old life never was. No complicated machinery to repair, no cargo schedules to meet, no corporate politics to navigate, just him, Vorthak, and the basic rhythm of survival and companionship. More importantly, what would happen to Vorthak when he left? The great predator had clearly become attached to their daily routine. Hyunwoo suspected that Vorthak had never had a companion before, certainly not one who provided regular medical care and showed genuine concern for his well-being. Over the next few days, as they waited for rescue, Vorthak's behavior became increasingly possessive. He rarely left Hyunwoo's side, and when he did, it was only to hunt for food or gather fresh water. He brought back larger and larger gifts, whole fruit trees dragged to the cave, fresh killed prey that could feed them for days, and rare medicinal plants that Hyunwoo's scanner identified as having powerful healing properties. "You're trying to take care of me," Hyunwoo realized one evening as Vorthak presented him with a collection of beautiful stones from the riverbed. "Just like I took care of you." The exchange had become mutual. Hyunwoo provided medical attention, steady companionship, and the strange comfort of his constant talking. Vorthak provided protection, food, and an unexpected sense of belonging that Hyunwoo had never experienced with his own species. When the rescue ship finally appeared in the sky 3 days later, Vorthak's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The great predator positioned himself directly over Hyunwoo, wings spread and claws extended, and released a roar that could be heard for kilometers. The message was clear in any language. This human was under his protection, and he had no intention of letting anyone take Hyunwoo away. Hyunwoo looked up at his friend's protective stance and realized that rescue had just become very complicated. How do you explain to a rescue team that you don't want to be rescued? And how do you convince a 3-meter predator that the approaching humans aren't a threat when you're not entirely sure you want them to succeed? The rescue ship began its descent, and Vorthak's growls grew louder. Hyunwoo placed a hand on his friend's massive leg, feeling the tension in those powerful muscles. "Easy, big guy," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." But as the ship grew larger, in the sky above them, Hyunwoo wondered if figuring it out would be possible without someone getting hurt. The rescue complication Captain Subin had seen many strange things during her 20 years of deep space rescue operations, but she had never seen anything like the scene that greeted her team as they landed on the jungle planet. Her missing person was supposed to be a stranded cargo mechanic in desperate need of rescue. Instead, she found Hyunwoo sitting calmly in a jungle clearing, apparently having a conversation with the largest predator she had ever encountered outside of a zoo. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with scales that seemed to absorb light and claws that could tear through ship hull plating. It stood protectively over the human, amber eyes fixed on the rescue shuttle with obvious hostility. "Well, that's not something you see every day," said Tae-hyung, the team medic, as he peered through the shuttle's viewing port. "Is that thing talking to him?" "It looks more like it's guarding him," replied Bo-ram, the security officer, already reaching for her tranquilizer rifle. "Standard protocol for dangerous fauna is to sedate first and ask questions later." "Wait," Captain Subin ordered, studying the scene more carefully. "Look at their body language. The human doesn't seem afraid, and the creature isn't attacking. Something else is going on here." Through the shuttle's external speakers, she called out to the stranded mechanic. "Hyunwoo, this is Captain Subin of the rescue vessel Bright Star. Are you injured? Can you move away from that creature?" Hyunwoo looked up at the shuttle, then at Vorthak, who was radiating tension like heat from a furnace. The great predator's eyes had never left the new arrivals, and his claws were extended to their full length. "I'm fine," Hyunwoo called back. "But you need to move slowly. He doesn't understand that you're here to help." "He?" Tae-hyung raised an eyebrow. "The mechanic is talking about that thing like it's a person." Captain Subin had been in rescue work long enough to trust her instincts, and every instinct was telling her that this situation was far more complex than a simple extraction. She powered down the shuttle's weapon systems and opened the main hatch but remained inside. "Hyunwoo, we're here to take you home. Can you walk toward the shuttle?" The response was not what she expected. "That's going to be a problem," Hyunwoo replied, glancing at Vorthak's increasingly agitated posture. "Vorthak here has gotten pretty attached to our routine. He's not going to want me to leave." "Vorthak?" Bo-ram stared at her captain. "He named it?" As if responding to his name, the great predator shifted position, moving even more protectively over Hyunwoo. A low rumble emerged from his chest, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Captain Subin made a decision that would later be praised by xenobiologists and criticized by safety experts. Instead of ordering an immediate extraction, she stepped out of the shuttle with her hands clearly visible and empty. "Easy there," she said, addressing both human and creature. "We're not here to hurt anyone." Vorthak's response was immediate. He rose to his full height and roared, a sound that sent local wildlife fleeing in all directions. The message was clear: approach at your own risk. But Hyunwoo's reaction surprised everyone. Instead of cowering or running, he reached up and placed a hand on Vorthak's leg. "Hey, it's okay," he said in the same calm tone he used during their morning routine. "These are good people. They're like me, remember? Same species." The great predator looked down at his human, then back at the newcomers. His roar faded to a confused growl. "Fascinating," Tae-hyung whispered into his communicator. "Captain, I think we're witnessing some kind of interspecies bonding. Look at how the creature responds to the human's touch and voice." Over the next hour, Captain Subin witnessed something that challenged everything she thought she knew about predator-prey: relationships. Hyun-woo demonstrated an incredible ability to predict and influence Vorthak's behavior. When the great creature became agitated, Hyun-woo could calm him with specific words and gestures. When Vorthak moved to block the rescue team's approach, Hyun-woo could redirect his attention without triggering a violent response. "How long have you two been together?" Captain Subin asked, maintaining a safe distance while studying the pair. "About 5 weeks now," Hyun-woo replied. "He found me the night after I crashed. I thought he was going to eat me, but it turns out he was just curious." "Just curious," Bo-Ram repeated flatly. "A 3-meter killing machine was just curious." "He's not a killing machine," Hyun-woo said with surprising firmness. "He's intelligent, he's capable of complex emotions, and he's been protecting me from other predators for weeks. His name is Vorthak, and he's my friend." As if to prove the point, Vorthak moved to a large pile of fruit near the cave entrance and selected several pieces, which he brought over and offered to the rescue team. The gesture was unmistakably social, like a host offering refreshments to guests. Captain Subin accepted a piece of fruit, noting how carefully the massive predator controlled his strength to avoid accidentally injuring her. "He's been taking care of you." "We've been taking care of each other," Hyun-woo corrected. "I treated an infected wound he had when we first met. He's been bringing me food and water ever since. We have a routine." The situation became more complicated when Bo-Ram, following standard safety protocols, attempted to position herself between the creature and the human. Vorthak's reaction was swift and terrifying. He moved faster than something his size should have been able to move, placing himself directly in front of Hyun-woo while releasing a roar that made the previous one sound like a whisper. "Don't," Hyun-woo said quickly, as Bo-Ram reached for her weapon. "He thinks you're trying to separate us. In his mind, I'm part of his territory now." "His territory?" Captain Subin asked. "More like his pack, I think. He's been sharing food with me, sleeping outside my cave to protect me from other predators, even bringing me gifts." Hyun-woo gestured to several piles of colorful stones, rare plants, and carved pieces of wood near the cave entrance. "I don't think he understands that I have somewhere else to go." The rescue became a standoff. Every time the team tried to approach Hyun-woo, Vorthak would position himself protectively. Every time they suggested sedating the creature, Hyun-woo would refuse. And every time Hyun-woo tried to explain that he needed to leave with the other humans, Vorthak would become increasingly agitated. "This is ridiculous," Bo-Ram finally said. "We came here to rescue a stranded human, not negotiate with local wildlife. One tranquilizer dart and we can extract him safely." "No," Hyun-woo said firmly. "You shoot him, and any chance of peaceful resolution disappears. Vorthak isn't just some animal. He's intelligent enough to understand betrayal, and strong enough to make sure you regret it." Captain Subin found herself in an impossible situation. Her job was to rescue humans in distress, but this human didn't seem to be in distress. If anything, he seemed healthier and more confident than most crash survivors she had encountered. More troubling, the creature he was protecting was clearly more than just a dangerous animal. The careful way it controlled its movements around the humans, its obvious emotional investment in Hyun-woo's welfare, and its complex social behaviors all suggested a level of intelligence that might qualify it as a sentient being. "Hyun-woo," she said finally, "I need you to help me understand something. Do you want to be rescued?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Hyun-woo looked at his rescue team, then at Vorthak, who was watching the conversation with obvious concern despite not understanding the words. "I want to go home eventually," he said slowly. "But I can't just abandon Vorthak. He's never had a companion before, and I don't think he understands that I have a life somewhere else. If I leave now, it will destroy him. And if you stay," Captain Subin pointed out, "you'll be listed as missing and presumed dead. Your family will mourn you. Your life will be over." Hyun-woo touched Vorthak's leg again, feeling the tremor of tension in those powerful muscles. Maybe there's another option. Maybe we don't have to choose between my old life and my new one. Captain Subin studied the pair for a long moment. What are you suggesting? Give me some time to figure this out. Set up a temporary camp. Let Vorthak get used to other humans being around. Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. It was not the rescue mission Captain Subin had planned, but as she watched the interaction between human and alien, she realized they might be witnessing something historic. All right, she said finally. We'll establish a base camp and see what develops. But Hyun-woo, you need to understand that this can't go on indefinitely. Eventually, we're going to need a resolution. Hyun-woo nodded, then looked up at Vorthak's concerned amber eyes. Don't worry, big guy. We'll figure something out. But as the rescue team began setting up their temporary camp, everyone wondered what kind of solution could possibly satisfy both human civilization and an alien predator who had claimed one of their own. Unconventional solutions. The temporary camp that Captain Subin established became the site of the most unusual diplomatic negotiation in human history. On one side sat representatives of human civilization equipped with advanced technology and centuries of diplomatic experience. On the other side was Vorthak, a creature who communicated through body language and growls, but who clearly had opinions about what was happening to his human. The first breakthrough came from Tae-hyung, the medical officer, who had been quietly observing Vorthak's behavior for 3 days. "Captain, I need to show you something," he said, pulling up data on his portable scanner. "I've been monitoring the creature's biological responses during his interactions with Hyun-woo. Look at these readings." The data showed patterns that Tae-hyung had never seen before in a predator species. Vorthak's heart rate and stress hormones dropped significantly during his daily routines with Hyun-woo. More remarkably, his brain activity showed complex patterns similar to those found in highly social species during bonding behaviors. "He's not just protecting a territory or a food source," Tae-hyung explained. "His body is producing the same chemicals that humans release during deep emotional bonding. This creature has formed what we would call a family attachment to Hyun-woo." Captain Subin studied the data with growing amazement. "You're saying this thing loves him?" "I'm saying this thing has rewired its entire biological and behavioral programming to accommodate a human companion. Look at this." Tae-hyung showed her sleep pattern data. "He's adjusted his natural sleep cycle to match human circadian rhythms. He's modified his hunting schedule to avoid disturbing Hyun-woo's daily activities. He's even changed his diet to include foods that won't alarm a human." Boram, who had been skeptical of the entire situation, leaned over to study the readings. "How is that possible? Predators don't just change their behavior patterns." "Highly intelligent predators do," Tae-hyung replied. "But only when the emotional investment is significant enough to override millions of years of evolutionary programming. This creature has essentially adopted Hyun-woo as a family member." The second breakthrough came when Vorthak began to understand that the other humans weren't trying to harm Hyun-woo. It started with small observations. He noticed that the newcomers brought food and water, just as he did. They showed concern for Hyun-woo's welfare, checking his health and asking about his needs. Most importantly, they had not attempted to hurt him, despite their obvious fear. Over the course of a week, Vorthak's defensive posturing gradually relaxed. He still positioned himself protectively near Hyun-woo, but he no longer roared at every movement from the rescue team. Instead, he began to watch them with the same curious attention he had first shown toward Hyun-woo. The real turning point came when Captain Subin made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Hyun-woo," she said one morning, "I want you to ask Vorthak if he would be willing to leave this planet with you." "Leave the planet?" Hyun-woo stared at her. "Captain, he's a 3-meter predator. You can't just put him on a ship and fly him around the galaxy." "Actually, we might," Be able to, she replied. I've been in contact with headquarters, and they're very interested in what we've discovered here. The Xenobiology Department is calling this the most significant interspecies contact event in human history. They want to study the relationship you two have developed. Boram looked skeptical. You want to bring that thing aboard a starship? That thing, Captain Subin said firmly, may be the key to understanding how humans can coexist with alien predator species. Do you have any idea how many worlds we've had to abandon because of aggressive native life forms? If we can figure out how Hyun-Woo managed to form a bond with an apex predator, it could change everything. Hyun-Woo considered the possibility. He had been struggling with the choice between his old life and his new one, but perhaps there was a third option. You think they would let Vorthak stay with me? I think they would build you a custom facility and give you whatever resources you need to maintain your relationship, Captain Subin replied. The scientific value alone would justify the expense. That afternoon, Hyun-Woo sat down with Vorthak to attempt the most complicated conversation of their relationship. Using the combination of words, gestures, and simple drawings that had become their shared language, he tried to explain the concept of leaving their jungle home for a place among the stars. Vorthak understood more than Hyun-Woo realized. The great predator had been watching the flying metal objects that brought the other humans, and he had observed how they seemed to travel between the ground and the sky. When Hyun-Woo drew pictures of them traveling together to meet more humans, Vorthak grasped the basic concept immediately. What concerned him was the possibility of separation. In his mind, Hyun-Woo belonged with him, and he belonged with Hyun-Woo. The idea of being apart was unacceptable. Hyun-Woo spent hours reassuring his friend that they would stay together, using every method of communication they had developed. He drew pictures of them in the same room, sharing meals, maintaining their daily routines. He acted out scenarios where they would meet new people but remain as a pair. Finally, Vorthak seemed to understand. But he had conditions. The great predator left the clearing and returned an hour later carrying a massive tree trunk that he arranged as a barrier between their area and the rescue team's camp. He then brought stones and arranged them in careful patterns around Hyun-Woo's cave. Finally, he retrieved several of his most prized possessions, the colorful stones, rare plants, and carved wood pieces that he had been giving to Hyun-Woo as gifts. The message was clear. If they were going to travel together, these things that belonged to their shared life would come with them. Captain Subin watched this preparation with growing amazement. He's packing, she said to Tae-hyung. A predator from an alien world is packing for a trip to human space. The most surprising development came on their last night on the planet. Vorthak approached the rescue team's camp alone, moving slowly and keeping his claws retracted. He stopped just outside their perimeter and made a series of low vocal sounds that clearly were not threats. I think he's trying to communicate with us, Tae-hyung said, activating his recording equipment. Vorthak repeated the sounds several times, then gestured toward Hyun-Woo's cave and back to the rescue team. The meaning became clear when he picked up one of the team's supply containers and gently moved it closer to Hyun-Woo's belongings. He wants to help us pack, Captain Subin realized. He's trying to contribute to the group effort. For the next hour, the rescue team found themselves working alongside an alien predator to prepare for departure. Vorthak proved to be surprisingly helpful, using his strength to move heavy equipment while being careful not to damage anything important. Boram, who had been the most skeptical team member, found herself oddly touched when Vorthak carefully wrapped her medical scanner in soft leaves after she accidentally dropped it. I still think this is insane, she said, accepting the protected equipment from claws that could have easily torn her apart. But I'm starting to understand why Hyun-Woo doesn't want to leave him behind. On the morning of departure, Vorthak stood at the entrance to the rescue shuttle, clearly nervous but determined. Hyun-Woo had explained that the metal flying object would take them to a larger metal floating object, which would then carry them to places beyond the sky. The concepts were foreign to everything in Vorthak's experience, but his trust in Hyun-woo was absolute. If his humans said they needed to enter the metal object to stay together, then that was what they would do. As the shuttle lifted off from the jungle planet, Vorthak pressed close to the viewing port, watching his world shrink below them. Hyun-woo sat beside him, one hand resting on his friend's massive arm. "New adventure, big guy," Hyun-woo said softly. "We'll figure it out as we go, just like we always do." Vorthak rumbled in what had become his version of agreement. As long as they were together, he could adapt to anything. Captain Subin watched the pair and realized that what they had discovered on that jungle planet would change the future of human expansion into the galaxy. The question was no longer whether humans could survive on worlds with dangerous predators. The question was whether they could learn to make friends with them. A new dynamic 6 months after leaving the jungle planet, Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of Research Station Harmony, watching Vorthak demonstrate hunting techniques to a group of fascinated xenobiologists. The massive predator moved with careful precision, showing how he tracked prey without actually harming any of the holographic targets in the training simulation. Life in human space had required adjustments for both of them, but they had adapted in ways that surprised everyone involved in the project. The first challenge had been communication. While Hyun-woo and Vorthak had developed their own system of gestures and sounds, the research team needed more precise methods of interaction. Dr. Jin Ai, the station's linguistics expert, had spent months developing a translation interface that could interpret Vorthak's vocalizations and convert them into human language. The day Vorthak first spoke through the device had been emotional for everyone present. "Hyun-woo safe now," had been his first translated words. "Pack is larger. Pack is good." The revelation that Vorthak viewed the research team as an extended pack had changed everything. In his mind, the humans weren't strangers studying him. They were family members who happened to communicate differently and have unusual customs. Dr. Min-ho, the project's behavioral psychologist, had been amazed by Vorthak's adaptability. "He's essentially learned to live in 2 worlds simultaneously," he explained to Hyun-woo during one of their regular sessions. "He maintains his natural predator instincts and behaviors, but he's also developed complex social relationships with humans based on completely different cultural frameworks." The proof of this adaptation was visible every day. Vorthak had learned to modify his strength when interacting with humans, understanding that what felt like a gentle touch to him could seriously injure his smaller companions. He had adjusted his sleep schedule to accommodate human work patterns. Most remarkably, he had learned to interpret human emotional states through facial expressions and vocal tones, responding appropriately to everything from stress to humor. But the most significant development had come from an unexpected source: the Galactic Council. News of the human-Kethmori bond had spread throughout the galaxy's political networks, reaching species that had been isolated from galactic civilization. For centuries, it turned out that Vorthak's people, the Kethmori, were not just random predators from an uncharted world. They were an ancient civilization that had withdrawn from galactic politics after a series of violent first-contact incidents with other species. The arrival of Ambassador Thekmar had been both thrilling and terrifying. The Kethmori diplomat was even larger than Vorthak, with silver-tipped scales that marked him as an elder of his species. He had come to Research Station Harmony to investigate reports of one of his people living peacefully among humans. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Thekmar had said through his own translation device, studying the interaction between Hyun-woo and Vorthak. "In all of Kethmori history, we have never formed lasting bonds with prey species." "We're not prey," Hyun-woo had replied, with Vorthak rumbling agreement beside him. "We're partners." The concept had taken weeks for the ambassador to understand, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Vorthak had not only survived among humans, but had thrived, developing emotional and social capabilities that exceeded anything in Keth-Mori cultural records. The diplomatic implications were staggering. The Keth-Mori controlled territory that included dozens of world's rich in rare minerals and strategic resources. For centuries, they had remained isolated, viewing other species as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be hunted. But if humans could form genuine partnerships with Keth-Mori individuals, it opened possibilities for cooperation that could benefit both civilizations. Ambassador Thekmar had made an unprecedented proposal: establish a joint colony where humans and Keth-Mori could learn to coexist, using the Hyunwoo and Vorthak partnership as a model. "Your bond has shown us something we thought was impossible," the ambassador had explained. "Perhaps it is time for my people to discover what we have been missing." The joint colony project had become Hyunwoo's new assignment. Instead of returning to his old life as a cargo ship mechanic, he found himself appointed as humanity's first Keth-Mori cultural liaison. His job was to help establish protocols for human-Keth-Mori interaction and to train other humans in the techniques that had made his partnership with Vorthak successful. Vorthak, meanwhile, had been given the title of Bonded Guardian, a new position created specifically for their relationship. His role was to help other Keth-Mori understand human behavior and to demonstrate that interspecies cooperation was possible. The work was challenging but rewarding. They had already helped establish successful partnerships between 3 other human Keth-Mori pairs, each relationship developing its own unique dynamics while following the basic principles of mutual respect and care. Young researcher Woo Jin had bonded with Sarek, a Keth-Mori female who had initially been brought to the station as a potential threat. Their partnership had developed around shared interests in plant biology, with Sarek teaching Woo Jin about jungle ecosystems while learning about human agricultural techniques. Security officer Haiwan had formed an unlikely friendship with Gorath, a massive Keth-Mori male who had been fascinated by human defensive strategies. Their relationship was more professional than personal, but it had proven that working partnerships were possible even without the deep emotional bond that characterized Hyunwoo and Vorthak's connection. Most surprisingly, Dr. Yuri had developed a mentoring relationship with Kes, a young Keth-Mori who had been injured in a territorial dispute. Their bond had formed around medical treatment and had evolved into something resembling a parent-child relationship, with Dr. Yuri teaching Kes about human medicine while Kes shared traditional Keth-Mori healing knowledge. As Hyunwoo watched Vorthak conclude his demonstration to the research team, he reflected on how much their lives had changed since that first terrifying night in the jungle cave. They had gone from predator and prey to partners, to pioneers of a new kind of interspecies relationship. Vorthak approached him as the research session ended, moving with the familiar grace that no longer seemed threatening. Hyunwoo pleased. "With demonstration?" he asked through his translator. "Very pleased," Hyunwoo replied, reaching up to touch his friend's arm in their customary greeting. "The new researchers are learning quickly." "Good. Pack grows stronger when all members contribute. Skills. It's still a maze.